So it's a real honor for me to stand up here today and be able to introduce our next keynote speakers, Margaret Whelan and Currey, because Margaret, years and years ago, touched Jennifer and my heart more than anybody in this industry when we met at a couple of different events. We got stuck in a snowstorm together and had to drive like 6 hours home from Maryland. You remember that? But along the way, when somebody like Margaret is sitting in your car with you and you have these great conversations, you learn so much. She's a real human being. She puts her heart out there, she puts her soul out there, and everybody that she's worked with, she has touched, and she loves doing business, and she loves helping people along. So I just want to say thank you. You touched our heart, and I really do appreciate everything you do for this industry. So with that said, without further ado, we want to welcome our keynote presenter, Margaret Whelan, Currey Cornelius from Whelan Advisory. Whelan Advisory is a woman-owned boutique investment bank and broker-dealer focused on mergers, acquisition, and capital raising advisory exclusively for the residential housing and construction industry. Since founding the firm in 2014, Margaret has advised clients in successful transactions representing billions, that's right, billions in capital. She is an industry expert leveraging deep knowledge of relevant drivers, market players, current valuations, and financing alternatives. Joining Margaret on stage as well is Currey Cornelius. With over 15 years in corporate finance, Currey has spent more than a decade focused on investment banking for construction companies. So, here to present trends in off-site solutions from capital to components, please welcome Margaret and Currey to the stage. Big round of applause.
So thank you very much, Dave, for the warm introduction. We were actually in DC, was that 5 years ago? And we were noticing there were a couple hundred people in the room at the Housing Innovation Alliance conference that we were speaking at, and we were noticing that people were running out early, and we thought maybe we were saying the wrong thing, and then we realized actually all the airports were shutting down. So by the time we got done with our presentation, it was Dave and I was grateful. If ever you want to go on a road trip with a stranger, it worked out pretty well. We did stop for a few pints of Guinness, remember that? We had our priorities. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you to Devin and the team. I really enjoy this conference. My background is that I've been an investment banker for 30 years, 3 decades, my whole career, and moved to the US in 1994, actually from Dublin, Ireland. And so I grew up in Europe, was educated there, came over to the States in search of the American dream, and now I live with my American husband, and we have 4 children, and the one thing that worries me more than anything else is where are my children going to live, and how are they going to afford home ownership? Because I feel like there's so many opportunities in front of us. I feel like the solution is in this room, which is why I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and we just have to keep pushing. It's hard for Currey, my colleague Currey, and I really enjoy these opportunities because we learn so much. So we have an hour, we have about 50 slides. We love to keep it interactive, the two of us, but we also love to take your questions along the way. And the plan is to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. The reason for that is a lot of you we have worked with in the past to help you to raise capital, get access to foreign capital, venture capital, whatever capital you need for your growth plans, we can help you with that. Then give you our perspective on what's going on in offsite, what's working and not working, and how to capitalize on that, bringing capital to components. And then talk a little bit about some of the case studies, some of the transactions we've closed, what worked and didn't work, and take your Q&A at the end or along the way. So as Dave said, I have a boutique investment bank that I started in 2014. That's nearly 10 years ago, and it was 20 years after I graduated from university in '94 and started my career on Wall Street. I've always worked with housing and construction companies. I was at UBS, which is the Bank of Switzerland, for over a decade. Then I was at JP Morgan, running the home building and construction group through the global financial crisis, which was really no fun. JP Morgan at the time was the biggest lender to the home building industry, and you'll see some of the charts in this presentation and get a sense for how much capital was eroded. I don't need to tell most people in this room we were there for it, but it was a trying time, and since then the capital has been coming back slowly but steadily. I was delighted to have the opportunity to start this company because there are not a lot of women in construction, women in investment banking. When you put the two together, I probably should have a horn for my unicorn status. But we're certified as a WeBank, which is a women's business enterprise. We also have our broker-dealer license on Wall Street, Whelan Advisory Capital Markets, and we're one of the only women-owned and founder-led banks on the street. So as an immigrant, I'm very proud of that. Thank you. And also, because I think it shows the opportunity, right? We all pick our hard, life can be hard, there's lots of ways to do things, but when you really push and you're consistent, you can have terrific success and pass that along, which is a big part of what I do now. So in terms of what we do specifically, a lot of folks like you in the room will call and say, we're at a pivot point, we're at an inflection, we have 100 million in revenue and 10 million in EBITDA, or we're a startup and we're trying to figure out how to get this dream, this concept we have, into something that's really going to be capitalized upon and valuable to the market. And so we can do that from a private capital perspective. We can help you think about where you are versus where you want to be, and what the best capital plan is for that, whether it would be with a private capital raise, debt or equity, whether it would be a short-term versus a long-term raise, whether you should be thinking about going public at some point, if so, when, or if you should sell to a strategic. And we have a strategic being like a home builder or a builder's first source. We have worked with clients we've closed, I think, 28 transactions, about $15 billion in volume since we started 10 years ago. And we've done all of these things. There's no perfect deal. Every deal that we work on, every transaction we close is highly negotiated. No two are the same. So you don't really need to think about what the solution should be from a capital perspective. You just need to think about, do I have a great idea and a proof of concept? We'll help you think through the rest. We only focus on home building and construction. It's quite a niche. It's quite a nuance. Within Wall Street in particular, it's small versus tech and telecom or healthcare, some of the big industries. But for me as an immigrant, I think more than anything else, the opportunity to help families in this country create good solutions and have access to home ownership, that's the thing I'm most proud of. So we work with home builders, traditional stick builders. We've also worked with some modular companies like Commodore Corporation. We represented them on their sale to Cavco. We do a huge amount of capital raising for land developers. Whether you're building a home for rental market or the retail market, and whether it's stick built or offsite, you need a piece of land to put it on. So we spend a lot of time with the land developers. Then we do a lot of single family rental, which Currey and I will talk about. It's been a great trend. And anytime you see a lot of repetition, that's a real good entry point for an offsite solution that any of you would be bringing to the market. And then finally, we do a lot on the construction technology side. We've worked for several framing companies, several plumbing companies, offsite solutions like Integra and TrustFab out of Phoenix. $13 billion, 9 years. We've closed 2 deals so far this year. Our industry is like housing. It tends to be cyclical. When rates go up, we get a shock. But usually we close about 6 deals a year, and that's the plan for this year as well. We have a very busy fall planned. And I don't know if any of you know Dean Reyna, the founder of TrustFab in Phoenix. Usually I see a few hands go up. So if you've met him, you never forget him. And I was doing a presentation it might have actually been at BCMC a couple of years ago, and he was all the way in the back of the room, but stood up to tell me that I was wrong about a bunch of different stuff, which of course I really appreciated. But we came to form a friendship, and when he was ready to sell his company, he contacted me. We represented them on their sale to USLBM. And Dean has boys, his sons, who work for him. They're baseball players. All their baseball friends work for him. It was very important to him to find an opportunity to sell the company to a new owner that would keep the business and the legacy going, and also allow the team to stay together. So we were able to accomplish that for him. I would say in terms of what I do, we're always trying to maximize the value for our clients, which is getting you the lowest cost of capital or the highest valuation multiple if you're selling. But for me, the fit, the people, the chemistry, the character and integrity is just as important. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the trends, and I think Currey and I will do some of this together. Currey and I are both students of the industry, and the best thing about having someone like Currey work, there's a lot of good things the way we work together every day, but the best thing was in March of this year when I had an opportunity to go to Japan, which I love going to Asia and I travel an awful lot, but I've been a lot of times already, and Currey said that he would love to go in my place. So it was really a win-win, and we'll talk a little bit about that, because what's fascinating when you take a step step back from the way we build homes in the US and all of these great solutions we're bringing to the market, is you go to Asia and you see they've been doing some of this stuff for hundreds of years. In fact, in the last 5 years, I think the last 3 years, we've closed 5 different M&A transactions with Japanese buyers, so Daiwa House, Sekisui House, and some of these folks that come in and buy U.S. home builders and construction companies. And they are absolutely stunned when the Japanese teams fly over here and walk around our job sites. They are stunned that we have human beings walking around putting up roofs, right? Because they fly in not just trusses, but whole components in Japan, or in some cases, whole modular units. They pick them up and down with a crane. So what we're talking about here is dramatically changing and improving versus what we've done in the past. But you don't even have to go to Japan. You can go to Canada and see solutions that have worked there for decades. In terms of the construction industry, I'm sure everyone at this point has read the McKinsey report, The Path to Productivity, that came out 6 years ago. They did a really good job of outlining what I like to call the opportunity, because I get up in the morning and choose to be positive. But what they said here is that we are the least technically efficient or tech-enabled industry of every industry that they looked at globally. In fact, we were so far in the bottom of the 4th quartile that we are behind farming and agriculture, which, I'm only laughing because it makes me depressed, but there's so much opportunity to fix this. Like, farmers, can you imagine farming is tough, but what we do shouldn't be more tough. To be fair, we did see a lot of improvement with COVID. I think some of the permanent positive changes that came out of that whole period were the acceleration of the adoption, and some of the opportunities that were there to capture already. And so we saw that in a couple of different ways. There was already a big trend towards wellness, right? Who doesn't care about being well and feeling well? We're already seeing that. And it was relative to the different components that were going into the homes or not going into the homes, for example, asbestos versus foam for insulation. Huge expectation from consumers around automation and connectivity, in terms of when they're driving home, they want to be able to turn on the air conditioning, open the garage door, see that their packages have been delivered, whatever it is. So all of the consumer-driven change is available. How do we get it into housing in the most efficient way? Most home builders are excited if they have an ice machine in the refrigerator, but of course, there's a lot more available to put into the house. More resilient materials, unfortunately, we need this more and more. It's always interesting when you see photos after hurricane damage and you see a couple of concrete built homes up and all the stick built homes are gone around it. But whether it's fires in California or hurricanes on the East Coast, anything that's more resilient is going to be better. And I think the opportunity with offsite, whether it is components or full solutions like a manufactured home, the opportunity is there to capture all 3 of these trends and put them together and bring a fully baked solution to the consumer and to the market. I love to read, I travel a lot, and I spend my whole time reading, and I love quotes. And this one I think is fascinating, because if you take a step back, if you go to a conference like this and you're trying to learn, or you're reading a book, or you're listening to a podcast, whatever it is, and somebody says something and you think, man, in a million years I never ever would have thought of that. For me, I get it. I have an older mom. I had my kids in my 40s, but my 13-year-old, my 11-year-old are always teaching me things. I'm like, man, your kids are really awesome, right? They're not encumbered by all of the different ways we think about things or refuse to think about it, but they really bring me light bulb moments. And I encourage you all to find people who can sharpen your minds in that way. It used to be the mentors or sponsors professionally were people who are older than me. Now I have millennial mentors. It's the ones who are younger than me, because I feel we all have to be learning as fast as the world is changing, and the world is changing really fast. And so you go from the light bulb moments and the opportunity to looking around at a lot of the rooms and a lot of the clients and a lot of the industries. Have any of you seen the chart? I decided to take it out because I got a lot of flack for it. But it was a bunch of all white guys in a room. And I called it PMS, pale, male, stale. And we don't have a lot of women in the industry, but we've plenty of PMS. So I got a little bit of negative feedback and had to remove that one. But this is kind of the same thing, right? We really have to challenge each other to think differently, because you don't want to be the blockbuster case study where Netflix just came in and ate their lunch and they could have bought Netflix, but they didn't. You don't want to be that person in that industry, especially when housing and shelter is so important to all of us, to all families. So I want to start about talking about a concept around labor, or the lack of availability of labor. I don't think that we necessarily have a housing affordability challenge in our industry. I don't think we necessarily have a labor shortage in our industry. I think the real opportunity to fix is to make it more efficient, reduce all the waste, reduce all of the improvisation, and the only solution is automation, right? It's taking some of this work off of the job site where so much can go wrong and into factories, and then bringing bigger components out into the market. But the builders will tell you it's labor. I just think, builders don't build, right? That's the funniest thing about our industry. If you look at the public financial statements of a home builder, and the balance sheet in particular, all of the risk they take is in land. It's not in construction. They'll tell you we don't have toolkits, we don't build. They outsource everything. So it's incumbent on all of us in the room to make the process that they're outsourcing as efficient as possible. The market used to think that the labor shortage, if that was the issue, was short term. But actually, if you look in the US, you have this problem where the population is aging. We call it the graying of the American workforce. And the challenge is, if we in our industry don't bring more young people into the industry to train them and to pass along all the expertise, then we're really going to get behind. We have to bring them up faster. Thankfully, they learn faster than we do, and they have more tools to deploy their new learnings. But each of us has to adopt someone. In fact, I often say at these conferences, find the most interesting up-and-comer in your company and bring them to the conference. Right, bring them here. The NAHB BSc should make it available for a reduced rate. Bring these young people into the room so they can really see what success looks like. The other thing that was very interesting to me, there's an article that the Economist magazine publishes every couple of years, and they talk about where are all the ninos. So 40 years ago, contraceptives were introduced in Mexico for the first time. The average family went to having 2 children from 7. So we had this skill set and this pride and this expertise that was getting passed down through these generations that were coming up into immigrants up into our workforce. We're happy to do labor. They're used to the heat. They're happy to be out on the job sites. That has fallen off dramatically. So you see people say, well, these folks are working in an Amazon call center, or they're driving for Uber, whatever it is. Actually, it's a generational shift that's gone and that we have to get ahead of. The good news is that when you look at the capital that is being invested into solutions, what all of you in this room are doing, you're reducing the need for labor. Right, the more money, the investment that you're making, the top here is the factory-built homes. The more dollars you're investing up front, the more labor you're taking out of the process. And so much of the labor is to do rework, right? It's not just doing the first job, it's fixing the job that the guy before you did. And so that's where the capital is coming in. It's reducing the need to have so much labor, but we really need this to be a permanent solution. In terms of the challenges, I don't really need to tell all of you in this room, but I think the inconsistency is the big one. We've talked about worker safety issues. We really should start with, as an industry, we're helping people, it's culture, how do we protect our people in the workforce? The cycle times are getting longer versus shorter. When I started my career in the early 90s, NVR, some of these early companies that were using solutions, factory solutions at that time, North Virginia Ryan, obviously local to us here, they would quote delivery times for the house in days. So they would say to the consumer, and they were public companies reporting to Wall Street, we will deliver your house in 46 days, maybe 48 days. Today it's over 100 days. Like, there's really not, if you think about it, with the rate at which everyone's expecting the faster solutions to everything, it's really unusual to go that far backwards. I know you all know this already, but it's really disappointing because when you look at some of the builders that are addressing this, Meritage Homes, which is a publicly traded builder out of Phoenix, has always been very focused on ESG. It was kind of part of their solution before it was trendy. They put up cameras on one of their homes back in, when was it? It was right before COVID. I guess it was 2018, 2019. And they just put a camera up on the front of the job site to see what was going on for the 110-day cycle. And what they realized is nobody was in the house whatsoever for about 60 days of 110 days. So of course, when we went into COVID, we all had to distance. Social distancing wasn't a problem because subs hadn't been in there for days at a time. But if you think about it, the consumer is waiting. A lot of the time, the consumer is locked in a mortgage rate. They're paying rent, waiting to move into their home, their families, their schools. Everything is waiting. So we shouldn't have all of these delays if we were using the technology and adopting it more efficiently. Of course, material waste and theft is a problem. So the faster you get those homes weatherproofed, the less risk there is. And I've already talked about the improvisation, but in my mind, when you bring in a very precise solution, off-site solution components to the job site that's installed correctly, which means it's installed with a mallet and not with a saw, right? Because if you see saws around components, you usually have a problem. And then if it's pre-cut for MEP, so all the subs coming in after you can work efficiently and everything is where it's supposed to be, that's where you really get the savings. And the more profit the builders have, the more they can invest in the technology they need to fix this stuff. I'm sure a lot of you know John Osborne, who's head of innovation for Builders First Source. He and I see each other at a lot of these conferences. We talk a lot. And he had seen me make one of these presentations about, in particular, what's different when you go to Asia. He would challenge me a lot. He didn't think it was accurate. And then he went to Japan on a field trip a couple of years ago, and he came back to me and he goes, wow, you're really right. In the US, it's just such a dirty business. And so if you think of a traditional stick-built home, about a half of the cost of goods sold for that house is sticks and bricks, right? Half of the cost of building a home is sticks and bricks. The National Framing Council estimates that about a third of those materials are in the dumpster that's in the front of every job site. Right, so it's not, the consumer is paying for that, by the way. The consumer, all of us who are drinking from paper straws because we're recycling plastic, have to absorb the fact that all of this waste that's not in the home, that's not in our pocketbook, is actually out front on the job site. This one was particularly depressing. I took it as I was driving around a couple of years ago because there was dirt. They were also taking dirt and putting it in the dumpster, and it was just sad on a lot of different levels. Anyway, John went to Asia. He came back. He said, you're right, and they've started to adopt that with ReadyFrame. A lot of this we've talked about already. It's kind of weaved into the conversation, but obviously reducing the waste, reducing the days, increasing the profit, that's where the capital and the benefits come in. And the more investors see an opportunity to exploit a advantage, the more the return they're going to generate, the less risk there is to that return, the more they're going to come into this. In terms of what the opportunity is, I said earlier that I think home builders it's a misnomer because they're not really building homes. On their balance sheets, they take an awful lot of risk with land. They really prioritize the sales and marketing process and the consumer and being able to differentiate their product as they speak to consumers. Unfortunately, the way their salespeople do that is by offering too many options, too many upgrades, too many elevations. So they talk about being high production builders, but it's not a high production mentality, and we really need that repetition, the simpler homes, the smaller homes, so that all of you can come in and excel and see the advantages. And I see a lot of you taking photos, but we're happy to share the presentation with you afterwards. Just let one of us know. So what are some of the good trends that are coming? We spend a lot of time with the John Burns research team. They do a really good job of anticipating what's coming and how to address it. One is the prevalence of smaller homes. So the smaller homes, the faster they are to build. And then also the prevalence of simpler homes. So the builders are catching on to the fact that in some markets, if they were offering so say they have a basic home plan, but if they're offering something like everything is included, which is a brand feature for Lennar, versus a semi-custom home, that the semi-custom home would usually have a higher margin for them, but only if they delivered all the options and upgrades at a profit. Because it was taking them so long to get them to the market, they were actually not getting the return they were hoping for. But not only that, there was a negative inference from the consumer that the less expensive home was less valuable, so the consumer would pay less for it. In fact, it was a marketing executive from outside of the industry that joined Meritage and explained it to them. They merged the two brands. They just offer a higher end, everything's included product, but the simplicity of that has made it much easier for the builders. I'm sure you're all familiar with BTR, Build to Rent. So coming out of the global financial crisis, a whole industry, which we've heard of as SFR, single family rental, was born. And it started in 2008 when Warren Buffett, of all people, went on CNBC and someone asked him, what are you spending your money on, or where do you see the big opportunities in this market? And he said the single biggest opportunity that he was seeing was to buy single family homes. Because you could buy homes that had been built in the growth period into 2007 when rates were so low for 5 or 10 cents on the dollar. You could buy them on the court steps. You could buy them at massive discounts and in scale. So folks like Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent went out, and we call them the aggregators. Initially, they had private capital, then public equity, now public equity and debt, then securitizations on these cash flowing assets. Some of them control over 100,000 homes. And within the US, we have 300 people living in 100 million households. 14%, 14 million, are single family homes. And less than 10% of those are owned by the aggregators, which means most are owned by the mom and pops. So this industry will continue to get bigger, to get deeper, and to get access to more capital. Over the last couple of years, into 2018, 2019, the efficiency, or I guess the lack of efficiency, was gone. The opportunity to buy big scale homes at a discount. And so what they started to do was build to rent. They were designing homes, purpose-built rental homes. In markets like Phoenix and Arizona, they were calling them horizontal apartments. You could have 18 or 20 per acre. So they're really small, 2-3-bedroom homes, 2-bathroom homes, but very, very efficiently built. Great opportunity for solutions to go into those homes. That's continuing. It's continuing all around the country. Some of them are bigger homes, more traditional, 3 or 4 per acre, 3 to 4 bedrooms. More bedrooms has been a real feature that consumers are looking for beyond everything else. That bedroom is the bonus room. It's the office. It's the home office. The kids are learning. You got your Peloton. It's different to the dining room of old. We're looking for spaces that are more flexible and can be used. And so there is a big range in the type of product and the way it goes to market, but it is the benefit of all of the purpose-built rental product is it's pre-spec'd. So the buyer, the aggregator, wants it to be efficiently built. They want it to be energy efficient. And the more you can address that market, the more easily you can build these homes, because you don't have all of the different options or upgrades along the way, and you don't have any changes. You can also get these investors, the ultimate owner, who will put in a 10 or 20% deposit up front in that house, and then the builder can borrow against that deposit, and these houses cash flow very quickly. Much different to multifamily, much more attractive to the multifamily industry, which is why it's growing so quickly. So in any of you, I know you're here nationally from all around the country, if you're seeing any opportunities to do some purpose-built rental homes, I really recommend thinking about it, trying it. You don't need your sales team, you don't need your marketing team as much, because the product is much simpler, but you don't have as high a gross margin, but you also don't have all the selling or G&A. So it's actually a great return on capital. In terms of who is doing this well from a home builder perspective, I know some of you are in the room, some builders, but also some of your providers. Toll Brothers locally here, Van Meter, NVR, and then Pulte Group. We represented the Moline brothers, Andy and Ryan Moline, in Jacksonville about 5 years ago. They sold their company to Pulte. And that was a great success story for many reasons. It was a young team. They were ambitious. They were recycling their own capital. They had big plans, but didn't have the pocketbook. And so partnering with a customer, especially a company like Pulte that has a very young CEO, he's probably about 20 years younger than most of his homebuilder CEO peers. So he's thinking about things differently, which helps as well. Do you want to jump in here for a little, Currey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important thinking about that side. it's not just the nationals that are doing it, it's the regional players. And we've met multiple home builders who are starting their own panel operations, starting their own manufacturing operations and vertically integrating. And that just speaks to the opportunity overall, the fact that these smaller builders who don't have the bigger capital bases, the opportunity is just so glaring that they pursue it. It was also interesting kind of sitting here and hearing you speak, because as much of it is repetitive and we're preaching to the choir about the benefits of offsite, I think it's interesting context, especially over the past few years. Many of our offsite and industrialized construction clients, they like times of duress. Market duress is where their product, their solution, their trade-offs really shine. And so when you think about the last few years and COVID and now the preceding period, or the subsequent period we're in right now, material theft with lumber going sky high, cycle times went extremely high. Some truss companies that we were working with were shipping product through multiple states and still getting the margin they needed because demand was so high. And as we continue to move into the future and labor becomes more and more of a problem, we showed some of the source data as far as the Mexico birth rates and some of the other supply side issues. But the end product is the labor force is aging year by year. And I think the average age of the frontline construction worker is 41 or 42. That institutional knowledge that they have, that they're carrying with them, it's going to be lost. And so how do we replace that institutional knowledge if the young folks in our industry aren't going into trades as much and not seeing that opportunity? We need to help them see that opportunity, because there's a great one, especially with the cost of higher education being what it is, and we have a lot of work to do there. But also just the birth rates overall coming down is going to continue to contribute to that. So we have to do something to head that off. So.
Yeah, Currey brings up a good point. It's the slowdowns or the changes in the market that really magnify the opportunity to see what's going wrong. As Warren Buffett likes to say, when the ocean's out, you see who's not wearing shorts. But it really magnifies the opportunity to address what's not working.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's more duress coming. I mean, I think everyone in our industry can agree it's not getting any easier to build homes. So we'll see how that affects offsite, but the interest is there, I think, from across the industry, and will continue to be there. So this is kind of the state of the offsite industry. We just wanted to step back, and it's really hard to define market share, especially when you're talking about offsite. As Margaret mentioned, I was able to go to Japan and really see what they had done in the industry. And it's, sometimes there's this feeling that offsite's like this new idea, and it's really fresh, but we have a long history of offsite construction in the United States. And actually it was Japan that used a lot of our ideas in the 1960s to advance their own offsite construction industry. And you can see today it's 15% of their overall market share, that's an estimate, but it really raises the bar for the entire industry as far as cycle times, as far as building quality, things of that nature. And what it took for them was really government partnership, and I'm again preaching to the choir to Devin and the NAHB team, who does a wonderful job on our behalf, our industry's behalf, as far as lobbying the government. But that's what it really takes. It takes a seeding there, and then it grows over time, and industry really takes that baton. That can come in the form of uniform codes and regulations, and Brian Kolker's in the audience somewhere, hopefully virtually high-fiving me. But uniform codes is a really big deal, and then the industry can advance things from there. So we're sitting here at 3%. It's a problem or an opportunity, and in our eyes, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and what you see, the reason it was adapted to such a high rate in Northern Europe is the government went in early, and you were saying they were running competitions for the best product. Maybe we can do more of that here in the US. And then once the private market, the capital, sees that it's a good opportunity to invest, then you get that permanent change.
And again, those ideas really came from us. We were doing them in the 1960s, but then we hit the recession of the 1970s, and we let off the gas. But there's this information, a lot of this information comes from the U.S. Construction Offsite Roadmap, which was put together by ModX Advisory. They're a great advisory group that works in our industry. If you haven't read the report, I highly recommend it. It gives great context on the overall industry and the market overall.
Speaking of recessions.
Yeah, exactly. So recent history, 2008, it happened in the United States. It affected all of us, and it affected offsite construction in a major way. And again, I think this is really interesting context. You can see, as we were getting into our overbuilt state in the early 2000s, again, there was market duress, and so people were looking for alternative solutions. Offsite was really trending upwards, and then 2008 hit, and a lot of the operators, a lot of the new ideas, a lot of the capital bases were just wiped out, and we really haven't recovered. Ken Simler actually put this on LinkedIn recently, and I saw it and was kind of inspired by it. If you don't know Ken, he's with Impressa and spoke yesterday. But are we at an inflection point moving forward? Are we kind of at that stage where offsite, is going to be adopted in a more industry-wide fashion? We think it could be, and we're going to talk about how the industry is evolving here because adoption can go very quickly. So this is a picture that I love. It's from Japan. It's Sekisui House or Sekisui Chemical. I forget which one, but it's one of the Sekisuis. And you can see, look, offsite doesn't work everywhere. There are kind of old challenges for offsite that persist. Again, preach to the choir, but I think it's important to provide this context. There's upfront capital expenditure. You can see these machines, they're very advanced, but there's a lot of CapEx it's upfront. You have to buy a lot of machines, you have to put together a factory, and that's a major commitment upfront. And then overhead as you move along. If your pipeline has a bump, if there's a scheduling volatility, something of that nature, your overhead doesn't stop, it keeps going. And you can lay folks off, but that's really true overhead. It's a fixed expense. It's not as variable as field labor. And so, that's challenging, and we'll talk about how to address that moving forward. Limited delivery radius. Some models within offsite are compensating for this in their products being flat pack shipped and things of that nature. Regulations, lack of uniform codes, and also just consumer and industry stigma. We have a battle there to fight as far as the quality of offsite, and we're getting there. And there's some really interesting offsite companies now that are putting together beautiful homes that are made offsite, but you wouldn't know it. And the success of Skyline Champion and Clayton is, on the one hand, a great thing for our industry, and on the other hand, it's a challenge because they have been so successful and they just do one thing and they do one thing really well.
Yeah. And so we talked a lot about the challenges, but there is an opportunity for success. We've seen it persistently. It's slow and steady, but it can catch fire very quickly. And some of the keys to success that we have seen from some of our clients are bringing in talent from outside the industry, folks that have had challenges, maybe the automobile industry, the energy services industry, but just who's going to think about it a little bit differently. Change is really hard in all aspects of our lives. I always think when you're thinking about a change, you really have to think about what is the opportunity versus what I'm giving up. And I think what we're giving up a lot of the time is comfort or money on the balance sheet to invest in something that may or not work. It's scary, but being able to partner with a customer that's successful, like ICG did with Pulte, and just takes it to another level, starting small, failing fast, staying agile as an entrepreneur, really thinking about what's working, what's not working, a few baby steps at a time. And the one thing we tell our clients more than anything else is don't run out of money, right? Whether you're Katerra, who spectacularly blew out $2 billion in equity, Zillow, $500 million on their iBuyer program, really tremendous losses in our industry already, but if you start small and are deliberate, you can make that capital work for you.
And so this is from our friends at the Housing Innovation Alliance. Dennis is in the crowd. If you don't know Dennis, come ask us for an intro or just introduce yourself. He's a wonderful resource in the industry, but they put together this offsite heat map. And the point we wanted to make by putting this in, there is a healthy ecosystem of offsite components and offsite providers throughout the United States, and they're everywhere. And look, there's places where it makes more sense and it's more obvious to have offsite, places with weather, acute labor challenges, elongated cycle times, things of that nature. And you can see the concentration in the northeast of the United States and generally the east, where you're going to have more concentrated markets geographically, so that addresses the limited delivery radius. And also the weather challenges there and the limited building window. But the industry overall is healthy, it's growing, we're becoming more connected, we can help each other, have sister companies, refine our ideas, and keep putting more product out to market.
Yeah, the Housing Innovation Alliance, if you haven't heard of them, it's a board that I've been on since the beginning. I think they've been around about 10 years now. And the one thing that I like about what they do more than anything else is the road trips. So 5 or 6 times a year, they've got a group of industry participants together, and you can go out and actually tour these factories, but spend a couple of days on a bus with peers. I've learned so much from those experiences. And it's because of the generosity of all the folks in our industry that open their doors and their factories and their minds to the rest of us that iron shapes iron, and we can really learn from each other.
So this is where we wanted to just we use the term offsite construction, and some folks use industrialized construction. I know we need to all sync on the terminology we're using, but we wanted to kind of lay out the landscape that we're seeing today and how U.S. offsite is evolving. First, there's obviously the structural building components folks. Jess and Sean are here, and they do a wonderful job. They've been there a long time, and that's kind of the first step, right? I think Jess called it don't quote me on this, but gateway drug. Once you get folks on the offsite components, it's kind of the easiest first step within the industry. And there's some really large producers that have seen that opportunity and are consolidating operators across the United States, and can be a really valuable resource for local builders looking to connect with panel producers and component producers just in their backyard. Turnkey framers is kind of the next step. It's great to stay in the controlled environment in a factory and really have continuous improvement, but eventually that product has to go out into the field. And so that's where these turnkey framers have said, we need to own that labor looking ahead. Innovative Construction Group, Ryan Moline will preach this to you. It's where he thinks he makes or breaks is out in the field, and so they own their labor. There's a new startup that we know, mostly because they're Irish, down in Houston called Future Frame, and they're doing the same thing. They have a large company in Ireland, and they're bringing that solution to the United States, and it's a full kit of structural components, so that's exciting to see in a market like Houston, where it's probably the cheapest labor in the United States, and they're making it work down there, and the builders are really buying in. One interesting volumetric modular, everyone thinks of Skyline Champion and Commodore/Cabgo, which again, Commodore is one of our past clients. Fading West is a small operator in the mountains of Colorado. And speaking of weather challenges, limited building window, affordability challenges, especially after the pandemic and work from home, and labor challenges. There's no skilled trades in the mountains of Colorado, not to speak of, not to bring cost efficiencies to bear and make housing more affordable for the folks in those mountain towns. And Fading West started a factory, and they're doing exactly that. So it's interesting to see that kind of grassroots innovation pop up in new places. Limited delivery radius, again, is a challenge within the industry. There are new models coming to address that. That's Mighty Buildings, and we're going to talk about a recent fundraise that they just completed. Also, NIOBuilt is also here. I don't think Scott Long is here, but one of his colleagues is, and they're advancing their model. And then last but not least, going on site with industrialized construction. Jennifer talked about Kubi yesterday, and they're bringing their mini factories on site or close to the site. And those are mini mobile factories. So there's a lot of new models all addressing the same problems, but really taking them also to the next level and adapting to the market we're in.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the solutions, the specifics, what works, what doesn't work. By the way, whenever you travel internationally to look at factories, you need a glossary of what modular means or what components means, because in different countries, in Europe it's different to the US, in US it's different to Asia. But when you take a step back, disruption is all the same, and disruption can happen really quickly. We've watched other industries like the automobile industry over the last century as in terms of an industrialized business that we could use as a comparison. We've seen Airbnb take over hotels. We've seen Amazon take over retail. We've seen Uber take over the black car, the yellow cab market. And so these things can come about very quickly when you really bring a solution directly to the consumer. If you take a step back, this is interesting. So on the left, Fifth Avenue in 1900, and I think there's one automobile on this page. It's hard to see, but everything else is a cart, horse-driven cart. And I want you all to guess when the photo on the right was taken. How many years later? It is 100% cars. And what Henry Ford said at the time that he was bringing the cars to the US is, if I'd asked the consumer what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? What year do you think the second one was taken? 46, so you think it was 46 years? 15? Yeah, that's a little close. It was actually 13. Yeah. 13, and I've lived in New York City. Fifth Avenue is an affluent part of the world, right? So people have more choices. Like iPhones were more readily available to people who had the luxury income to afford them. But the point is just that it can take off really, really quickly. And so always have your eyes open, be anticipating what's around the corner, partner with your customers, with your suppliers. This is another chart from Tony Seba, who does an awful lot of work just on what innovation means. And what the yellow line is showing you is how quickly an iPhone or any of these new technologies can be adopted. Okay, so we're coming up to the last section, and we appreciate all of your engagement so far. We want to wrap this up a little bit with exactly what we do, because what we find, a lot of you come up to us at the end of these presentations and want a 101 on how to raise capital, or you don't want to ask a question in a group environment if you're thinking about selling your company. So what we thought we'd do is just wrap up in terms of what exactly we do and how we do it. As we mentioned, we've closed 28 transactions. I think it was around $13 billion in volume since 2014, 9 years, or maybe a third.
2018.
Or 2018?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
28
Yeah,
transactions,
even
13
better.
billion since 2018.
Yeah. Maybe half of those are construction, factory related, because it's a part of the business that I love. A lot of bankers find it quite tedious or they don't understand it. I personally love it, and that's why we've had great success. In fact, a couple of the transactions we've closed, something I never like to do is to pick up a mandate another banker has failed at, but we've done that a couple of times successfully just because our investment positioning and the way we understand our client is so unique and different. You want to go through this one?
Yeah, so now we're putting ourselves in the position of we want to raise capital or find a capital partner. And sometimes there's shades of gray in every transaction. It really depends on what the ownership group wants. And for instance, our friend Dean Reyna, who we represented Trust Fab companies just last year, and he was again the largest independent offsite provider in the Phoenix market, one of the largest building markets in the US. Dean did sell 100% of his business. He had silent capital partners. He didn't own 100%. He owned about a third of the business. And they sold 100% of their share to USLBM. That's what USLBM typically likes to acquire. And so you're probably thinking Dean's probably having a margarita somewhere in Costa Rica or something like that. But he stayed. He stayed with the business. He had a very young team. He wanted to get a new capital partner to continue to grow, frankly, to take some personal stress off of his plate so he could go have fun and have more of an impact on the industry. That was the goal when we set out. And Dean, since then, has been promoted to the Southwest head of components for USLBM. So seeing that vision happen, that's a lot of fun for us and obviously for Dean too. So putting yourself in that position, okay, I need capital, I want to do or find a new capital partner. Think about your strategy. And this seems like a given. Everybody knows their business really well, but can you really articulate your strategy to investors? What target market are we going after? And it can't be everything. You don't want to boil the ocean. You really want to know, here's what we're good at, here's what we pursue. If it's custom builders, if it's regional builders, if it's national builders, if you're more of a high volume velocity provider, then know that and portray that accurately and succinctly to investors. You really want to think about timing. It needs to be the right time. You need to have good growth in front of you, also a nice trend of growth behind you. If you're declining, no one wants to step into a declining business. I mean, there are certain investors, but they don't pay a premium by any means. You want to have, but specifically, what does that look like? Backlog that's growing, the margins within backlog are looking strong, and also just your overall projections. Speaking of projections, you want to be really organized, and a CFO or competent controller can be worth their weight in gold. Someone who can competently look at these trends internally will help, but we don't go with the deal, and so you really need that financial person to help put together that strategy within the financial statements and be able to portray that to investors. Also audited or reviewed financials. Having financials with integrity, we often see operators with QuickBooks, and QuickBooks is great. But having that third-party CPA look over your shoulder is really important, because if you think you're doing 10 million of EBITDA, that's the metric we all look at, bottom line profit. If you think you're doing 10 million of EBITDA and then you get in a process and a CPA looks at it and whoops, we're actually doing 6 or 7 or 8, that can really blow up a process and question the integrity of the overall organization, of the company. And last but not least, focus. Stay true to your identity. Don't be everything to everyone. And also, you'll hear most investment bankers, all the good ones, say time kills deals. Once you take on a transaction process and you're moving forward, keep moving forward. Don't waste time. Be efficient.
So you don't want to have to slow down because you found a bust in your forecast model or your CPA didn't do a good job with the historicals. One of the reasons your EBITDA is so important is because when you come to a banker or a buyer who wants to take over your company, they're going to put a multiple. We're seeing these deals close 6 to 8 times EBITDA. So if you're off by a couple of $1 million, that can be really material in terms of the CIF, the cash and fist, when you close your deal. So it's important to build the trust with these buyers, not to erode it. In terms of what we do, the secret sauce.
Yeah, so this is the actual process, and transactions are anything but simple, but we break it down into these three simple steps to help our clients understand what's going to happen in the future. And the first step is positioning. Margaret mentioned this. Some of our friendly competitors, we feel, don't spend enough time on this, but we really take a month or 6 weeks to really just get to know your business. We'll send you a huge list of questions. We'll really dig down into your strategy, into your organization, into your management team, into your financial statements, and really understand that, and then position it in a very succinct and crisp marketing book. And that contains kind of all the highlights about your business and your team, and we'll take that out to investors. So that's step 2, is actually going out to those investors. We do everything on your behalf initially. So we have the initial conversations. We go to trusted capital partners, the folks that have good reputations out in the industry, the folks that have closed deals previously and proven they can get deals done. And we also stay in touch with these folks constantly. We're always learning about, where they're investing, what types of companies they're looking at, what markets they're looking at, where they want to expand. The Japanese groups, as Margaret mentioned, they continue to invest. Sumitomo is building a new trust plant in North Carolina, and those are the kinds of things we keep tabs on because it helps us position our clients for those investors and buyers. During that process, we eventually send a process letter, and we say, here's what we want to see in terms of your offer. Those offers are then submitted. Then you, the client, picks the best of the bunch, the best cultural fit, also the best terms. We negotiate those terms, and then we guide you through the due diligence process in step 3 all the way to close. That tends to take 60 to 90 days. If the process goes perfectly smoothly, from the day we sign the engagement letter to the day we close, it's about 6 months. It can go faster, depending on your wishes. It can go slower, depending on market volatility or working with a Japanese buyer, for instance, because they take forever and they're very studious.
Deliberate is the word we like to use.
Yeah, very deliberate and very studious.
Close and fund.
Yep, that's it. Then we close, and that's the fun part. The investor universe, it's really never been wider for offsite. Strategics, US LBMs, Builders First Source, UFP offsite. These folks, they actually did go on a hiatus recently. It was about from the time we closed Trust Fab companies, June of last year, until about a year later, they just kind of went quiet. It was a more volatile market. It was hard to price companies and effectively price investments based off the huge pandemic boom that folks had seen. That wasn't normal. Everyone knew it wasn't normal. And so we had to kind of get a more certain track moving forward. But they are back. They're active. Deals are getting done. So a more exciting time in the marketplace. Home builders, as Margaret said, they're vertically integrating. We sold Innovative Construction Group to Pulte. And also, the other financial investors, too, are coming forward and putting their dollars to work. And here's some examples of that. This is more on the venture capital level. We don't do as much in the venture stage, but deals are getting done, including Mighty Buildings. Just got their recent raise done, $50 million. Agoras, they were mentioned yesterday, the SEAL team out of San Diego. And Vive, they went through a little bit of a reorganization earlier this year, but they raised $400 million. So that really shows the investor appetite is out there, that these tailwinds or really headwinds in our industry are causing tailwinds in the investment marketplace.
There used to be a big push by corporates, we call it CVC, corporate venture capital, where the board of the big companies, especially the public companies, would say, go and put some money at risk, throw it at these different ideas, just see what the disruptors are. And in other industries, corporate VCs are about 20%. And in our industry, it's closer to 12, unfortunately. They do make great partners because they can come as a customer, a supplier, strategic, essentially, so they bring more than just capital. But it's very hard to find them in our industry, that we just don't have enough of them. So we've talked about it a lot. This is the last slide, and this was the one we sold to Pulte in Jacksonville. The two brothers stayed on. They still run the business day today. We saw them a couple of weeks ago at BCMC, and they're just really happy, really chill. I think the idea of selling your company or making all that information available to different people is terrifying. People call us at least once or twice a year about buying my company, so I'm very familiar with it. But the fit, as I said earlier, is so important. And often some of you will call us and say, we've had a meeting with someone who is interested, how would we prepare and where do we go from there? So we appreciate it. That was 50 slides in 50 minutes. It's great to be here again with all of you and happy to take any questions.
in the build to rent scenario, what, try to walk me through what that looks like. I mean, how do you sell a company that's needs a massive amount of capital to tie up in buildings and in assets to create cash flow? How does that come out the end as a sale?
And by company, you mean a modular company or a home builder, a home building company? Yeah, yeah, sure. So it's a good question. It's when you look at build to rent, and build to rent is rental homes versus retail homes, but how does an investor underwrite the team or the company actually delivering the homes versus the massive balance sheet that they're going to put at risk with those houses, right? So they tend to have two sets of capital. They'll come in and value your home, your business based on your profitability, your earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. And then separately, they will have much, and that's an opportunity risk, so it's going to be a much higher return on capital that they're looking for. Separately, they'll have much less expensive capital, what we call an income fund, that's going to buy those stabilized assets. So once they're built, they're going to transfer at some kind of market price, usually at certificate of occupancy. Usually there's a third party who will lease them up, stabilize them, manage them, and they'll go into a fund that is securitized by those cash flows and has a lot of leverage on it. And so that's basically the life cycle. They're only underwriting your business versus the whole opportunity.
Is there a capital company that takes all of that under one umbrella? In other words, capitalizes the investment into the properties, creates a huge balance sheet, then the same company buys those and manages?
Yeah, there's two groups. One would be the operators, the aggregators themselves, like Invitation Homes. They're all structured as REITs right now, so they don't take a lot of development risk. They can't take long-term risks because of their tax status, but they will absolutely buy into an operating model for sure. And then some of the institutional capital has opportunity, all the Blackstones, the Oaktrees of the world, they all have opportunity funds and income funds. And so they were used to partnering, Brookfield, all of these guys we work with. Yeah.
On the build to rent, why aren't they doing single family detached? It seems like if they're building to create an income stream, they would make more income compared to the cost of construction in an apartment building, in a big attached, 18 units per building.
Driven by the consumer, right? The consumer has the choice to stay in a multifamily traditional apartment building or to stay in a horizontal apartment, single family, and they have the choice to stay in townhomes. It could be 2 or 3 plexes or 20 per acre with shared walls. The consumer's choice right now is a fully independent home. They want fully detached with the parking. Yeah.
And
We want detached more than living in an apartment, but if so we'll pay a little bit more rent for detached, but if you cap rate that against the increased cost to build that, including the land and everything and impact fees, that still is a better cap rate, building detached and regular.
You can charge more rent for it. Yeah, you can charge like 20-30% more monthly rent for a new home versus an older one in a lot of markets for a single family versus a multifamily. Yeah, and then the other thing is the appreciation in the underlying assets, because those investors are looking at the cap rate relative to the near-term cash flows, are also looking at their exit. The appreciation tends to be greater, but they're underwriting that risk, the home price appreciation for single versus multifamily.
it's also drastically more efficient to build, right? These are simpler homes. Cottage-style homes in many cases, they're smaller, but they just roll them out because they're the same design, there's no options. Things of that nature that slow down the retail home building market.
Time for one more question, so we'll go to Mark in the back. Go ahead.
Do you guys deal with investors who are interested in 3D partnerships?
Investors that are interested in what?
Private public partnerships?
No.
Do you don't do any deals where you have a land that's owned by a municipality?
The MUDs, the lower impact fees or opportunity zones. If you think about the investor universe, 100% is as a pie. There's a sliver that's interested in that stuff. So sometimes we'll do what we refer to as a rifle shot, or someone who has an interest in that or a business in that area will call us. We can't really run a process. There's just not enough interest. You tend to eliminate all the strategics, all the foreign buyers, and get to a very short list of investors. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Dave and
everyone.
Devin. Yeah, that was fun.
All right, how about another round of applause? That was awesome. Never, never, never disappoints. All right, so thank you, Margaret and Currey. It was an awesome presentation. I hope everybody enjoyed that.